The poor black boy saves the millionaire's daughter from a kidnapper who tries to throw her off a cliff. A story that will leave you speechless. What happens in the middle completely changes the ending. We'd love to know where you're watching this video from, so leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all our content. In a small coastal town, surrounded by towering cliffs and a constant breeze carrying the scent of the ocean, lives Samuel, a 12-year-old boy. The town, called Santa Vittoria, is known for its natural beauty but also for the glaring disparities between its residents. On one side, wealthy families live in mansions atop the hills, overlooking the sea, while on the other side, the poorer inhabitants reside in small, weather-worn wooden houses, many of which sit on the edge of the cliffs. Samuel belongs to the latter reality. He lives with his mother, Maria, a strong and hard-working woman who supports their household by working as a maid for the rich Morera family. This family, consisting of businessman Roberto Morera, his wife Isabel, and their daughter Julia, is one of the most powerful in the region. Roberto owns multiple properties and businesses that drive the local economy, but he's also known for his coldness and lack of empathy toward the less fortunate. Maria is a quiet woman who performs her duties without complaint, but her face always bears the shadow of exhaustion. She is Samuel's rock, and although they live with many hardships, she does everything she can to give her son whatever little she can afford. Despite his circumstances, Samuel is an incredibly intelligent and curious boy. He loves to explore the town, discovering new places and observing people's behaviors. Many times, his mother brings him along to the Morera household, and while she works, Samuel stands on the sidelines, watching the luxurious life of the family, always invisible. However, between him and the Morera's daughter, young Julia, an unlikely friendship blossoms. Julia, at 10 years old, is a lonely girl. Raised in an environment of luxury, she is suffocated by the emotional absence of her parents. While Roberto is always busy with his businesses and Isabel is absorbed in maintaining social appearances, Julia finds solace in Samuel. Their friendship is pure and genuine, yet also secretive. Julia has never mentioned Samuel to her parents, and he knows his mother would be worried if she found out he was getting close to the daughter of her employers. Despite all the differences between them, the two have formed a bond of trust that ties them together in a unique way. They often meet in a small clearing near the vast Morera estate, hidden from the world. There, they talk, play, and explore the surrounding nature. Samuel is protective of Julia and, in a way, feels responsible for keeping her safe. He can see the emptiness in her life, and although she has everything materially, she lacks the warmth and simplicity of true human emotions. Everything changes one day, which began like any other. After finishing his schoolwork, Samuel went to the clearing where he and Julia would meet. It was a sunny day, and the sea breeze brought a feeling of peace. Julia arrived a little later, running joyfully toward her friend. They began playing as usual, and for a moment, it seemed like nothing could interfere with their secret friendship and the tranquility they felt there. However, their joy was abruptly interrupted when a strange man appeared in the clearing. He was tall, with worn-out clothes and a sinister look in his eyes. His name was Ottavio, a man who had worked for Roberto Morera years ago. He had been fired in a humiliating manner and harbored deep resentment against the family. After losing everything, Ottavio had fallen into debt and despair, and now, he saw Julia as his chance for revenge and a ransom that could change his life. With frightening speed, he grabbed Julia, covering her mouth so she couldn't scream. Samuel, hidden behind a bush, watched with his heart racing. The kidnapper dragged Julia toward the cliff, where the threat was clear. He would throw her into the abyss if the ransom wasn't paid. Samuel knew there was no time to think. All he knew was that he had to save Julia. Driven by an instinct he didn't fully understand, Samuel silently crept through the vegetation until he was closer. Ottavio, distracted by Julia's struggle, didn't notice the boy. Then, in a crucial moment, when the kidnapper was about to make another threat, Samuel found a rock on the ground and, with all his strength, hurled it at Ottavio. The stone hit the man's shoulder, causing him to stumble. The opening was enough. Samuel rushed to Julia, and with a quick pull, he freed her from the kidnapper's grasp. While Otavio was still recovering from the blow, Samuel grabbed Julia's hand and led her away from the edge of the cliff. Things seemed to be spiraling out of control, but suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air. Samuel, using his quick thinking, had sent a silent distress signal on his cell phone, which had been hidden in his pocket. The authorities arrived in time and arrested Otavio, preventing the situation from taking a tragic turn. After the kidnapping, the town was in shock. Everyone talked about Samuel's heroic act. The boy, who until then had been invisible to Santa Vittoria's elitist society, was now at the center of attention. The local media began to praise the boy's brave act, and the town, once divided, now seemed united around its new hero. Roberto Moreira, who had always been distant from everyone and everything, found himself forced to acknowledge Samuel's worth. At first, he tried to reward the boy with money, believing that was the only way to express his gratitude. However, Samuel, with his purity and dignity, declined the offer. All he wanted was to see Julia safe and happy. Julia, on the other hand, grew even closer to Samuel. Their friendship was no longer a secret, and Maria, upon finding out, was initially concerned but came to understand that the bond between the two was special. After the kidnapping and Samuel's courage in saving Julia, he suddenly found himself in the spotlight. Until then, he had been just another invisible boy in Santa Vittoria, a poor child living on the margins of a society marked by deep social inequalities. However, his heroic act had elevated him to a new status. He was now seen as a hero, and the story of his bravery began to spread throughout the town and beyond. At first, Samuel barely understood what was happening. The people who used to ignore him now greeted him in the streets, praised his courage, and admired him. Local reporters came to his house for interviews, and he was invited to events and ceremonies in his honor. Yet, this public recognition brought with it a weight Samuel was not prepared to carry. Though he had acted purely out of instinct to protect his friend, the repercussions went far beyond his intentions. The most immediate change occurred at school. The school environment, which had once been just another extension of his humble, anonymous life, had now become a stage where he was the center of attention. Many classmates began to approach him, some genuinely impressed with his bravery, but others with more superficial intentions. The children of the wealthier families, those who had always kept their distance due to his humble background, now seemed intrigued by the fact that a poor boy was receiving so much attention. However, Samuel soon realized that not everyone viewed him favorably. Envy began to manifest in subtle ways, with reproachful looks and nasty comments whispered behind his back. He just wanted to get attention, some said, implying that he had acted strategically to gain fame. Others accused him of taking advantage of the situation to get closer to the Moreira family and improve his own condition. This ambiguity in social reactions began to weigh on Samuel, who had never wanted to be in the spotlight. Among those who treated him poorly were mainly the children of the local elites, accustomed to being the only ones to shine. Lucas, the son of one of Roberto Moreira's business partners, became one of Samuel's main antagonists at school. Lucas, who had always enjoyed privilege and respect due to his family's status, began to feel threatened by Samuel's sudden popularity. Lucas constantly provoked him, spreading rumors and trying to undermine the boy's heroism. Meanwhile, in the Moreira household, the situation was equally complicated. Isabel, Julia's mother, though grateful that her daughter had been saved, saw Samuel as a threat to the family's image. She feared that the friendship between Samuel and Julia, now stronger than ever, would become public and cause discomfort and embarrassment to the local elite. For her, it was unacceptable that her daughter had such a close relationship with a maid's son. Isabel, therefore, began pressuring Roberto to control the situation. Roberto Moreira, on the other hand, was torn. On one hand, he felt he owed his daughter's life to Samuel and wanted to express his gratitude. On the other hand, Roberto had always been a cold and calculating man, more concerned with his business and the family's public image than personal bonds. Initially, he tried to reward Samuel with money, believing that would be the quickest and easiest solution. "Here's an amount that will change your life," he said to Samuel in a private meeting, handing him a thick envelope filled with high-value bills. But Samuel, true to his dignity and the principles his mother had taught him, politely refused. He didn't want money or material recognition. All he wanted was to see Julia safe and continue living his life as simply as possible. His refusal left Roberto perplexed and Isabel even more suspicious. To her, Samuel's refusal of the money signified that he had other motives, something she was unwilling to uncover. This situation began to create a silent tension within the Morera household. Julia, for her part, remained loyal to Samuel. She didn't care about social differences and continued to see him as her best friend, the only one who truly understood her and treated her as an ordinary person, not just the daughter of a rich and influential family. However, even Julia began to notice that something was changing within her own home. Her parents started treating her differently, trying to control her more closely and limit her outings with Samuel. Meanwhile, at home, the relationship between Samuel and his mother, Maria, also underwent changes. Maria, who had always been a discreet and hard-working woman, began to feel the weight of the notoriety falling on her son. She had always been aware of the invisible barriers separating the poor from the rich in Santa Vittoria and feared that this exposure might bring more problems than benefits for Samuel. She constantly advised him to stay away from the limelight, saying, "Son, these people only look at you because they needed you, but don't be fooled. When all this blows over, you'll go back to being what you've always been to them, invisible." But Samuel, despite listening to his mother, couldn't ignore the sense of responsibility consuming him. He knew he had changed not only Julia's life, but also his own story. Even though he didn't want fame, he knew he now carried a public image that many expected him to honor. Over time, Samuel began to realize that his heroic act had forever changed his life, but it also brought to the surface the truth about Santa Vittoria's social tensions. He was no longer the same invisible boy, but at the same time, the town wasn't ready to deal with a hero from such a humble background. The weight of this duality began to become unbearable for Samuel, who gradually started questioning what he truly wanted for his future. As the fame surrounded him more and more, Samuel started to understand that in order to survive in that world of appearances and interests, he needed to be more than just a brave boy. He needed to be clever, wise, and, above all, prepared to face a much larger battle than the one he had fought at the cliff. The battle for his own identity in a world that still saw him as someone without a place. After the drastic changes that occurred in his life, Samuel began to feel the weight of his notoriety. The unexpected fame and the ambiguous reactions from society left him unsettled. He had always been a boy who observed everything, and in the days following Julia's kidnapping, his sharp perception made him notice something strange about the Morera family, especially Roberto and Isabel. Roberto and Isabel's behavior had changed significantly after the incident. Roberto's initial gratitude had quickly cooled, and although he tried to maintain a polite front, there was tension in the air. Isabel, on the other hand, became increasingly controlling over Julia's life. Where she had once been permissive and somewhat absent, Isabel now monitored her daughter's every move, restricting her outings and limiting her meetings with Samuel. The first time Samuel noticed something truly strange was when he overheard Roberto and Isabel arguing during one of his visits to the mansion. He was waiting for Julia in the garden when he heard raised voices coming from inside the house. The words were muffled by the thick oak door, but the tone was unmistakable. Isabel was demanding that Roberto do something to end the situation before everything came to light. Although Samuel couldn't understand the exact context, he knew it had to do with what had happened at the cliff and, somehow, with him. Samuel's curiosity grew, but he knew he needed to be cautious. As the days passed, he began to observe the Morera family's patterns even more closely, especially Isabel, who seemed to be increasingly nervous and worried about something he didn't yet comprehend. Her changed behavior toward her daughter was also noticeable, making Samuel even more attentive. Meanwhile, Julia, being a smart and perceptive girl, also began noticing that her parents were acting strangely. They avoided certain topics and seemed anxious whenever Samuel was mentioned. Until then, Julia had always believed her friendship with Samuel was something pure and innocent, and although she knew her parents had concerns about the social differences between them, she never imagined there was more to it. However, their recent behavior left her suspicious. One night, Julia decided to take matters into her own hands. She always had free access to the house and knew there were places where her parents kept important documents. Using her intelligence and determination, she decided to look for information that might explain her parents' strange behavior. During one of these searches, she entered Roberto's private office, a place where she was rarely allowed. The office was large and well-organized, with dark wooden furniture and walls lined with shelves full of books and folders. Julia began to discreetly sift through some papers on the desk, but found nothing relevant. Then she noticed a small locked drawer at the bottom of the desk. Determined, she searched for the key and, after a few minutes, found it hidden inside a book. When she opened the drawer, she found an old letter in her mother's handwriting. Julia's heart raced as she read the first lines. It was a letter Isabel had written to Roberto years ago, discussing a secret they had kept all this time. Julia couldn't believe what she was reading. Samuel, her best friend, wasn't just the son of their maid, Maria, as everyone believed. He was, in fact, the son of Roberto Moreira. The letter revealed details of a relationship between Roberto and Maria that had taken place years before he married Isabel. When Maria discovered she was pregnant, Roberto pressured her to keep the situation a secret, offering her money in exchange for her silence and continued loyalty as a domestic worker. Isabel found out about the affair sometime later, but rather than publicly confronting her husband, she chose to keep the secret to protect the family's reputation. However, she forced Roberto to keep Maria in a subordinate position and ensure that Samuel never learned the truth. Julia was in shock. This secret completely changed the dynamics of her life and her relationship with Samuel. He wasn't just her friend. He was her half-brother. The revelation filled Julia with a mix of emotions: surprise, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could her parents have hidden something so important for so long? And how would Samuel react when he found out the truth? Without wasting time, Julia ran to tell Samuel what she had discovered. They met in their usual hiding spot, the clearing near the mansion, and with a pounding heart, she revealed the truth to him. Samuel was initially silent. He couldn't process what he had just heard. The idea that Roberto Moreira, the man who had always treated him with coldness and distance, was actually his father seemed absurd. But as Julia showed him the letter and explained everything she had found, the truth began to sink in. The reason Roberto had always treated him with icy indifference now made sense. Isabel's evasive behavior, her attempts to keep him away from Julia, everything was tied to the secret they had been carrying. Feelings of anger, confusion, and betrayal began to overwhelm Samuel. How could his mother have kept this from him for so long? And what did this mean for his life going forward? Seeing the pain on Samuel's face, Julia tried to comfort him. She knew the revelation was devastating, but she also believed Samuel had the right to know the truth. "You're not alone," she said, holding his hand. "We're siblings, and we'll face this together." Samuel spent the following days in a whirlwind of emotions. He confronted Maria, his mother, who tearfully confirmed the entire story. Maria explained that she had done everything she could to protect Samuel, fearing that if the truth came out, he would suffer even more at the hands of the Moreira family. She had raised him with love and always tried to keep him away from the intrigues that involved the town's elite. To Maria, keeping the secret was the only way to ensure Samuel had a chance to live a dignified life, even if it was on the fringes of society. Samuel's anger began to transform into a mixture of sadness and acceptance. He loved his mother and knew she had done what she believed was best, but the fact that his entire life had been built on such a monumental secret was difficult to accept. And worst of all, he now had to deal with the fact that Roberto, the man who had always despised him, was his biological father. The revelation of this secret created enormous internal pressure on Samuel, who felt torn between his anger toward Roberto and Isabel and his love for his mother. He didn't know how to handle the situation, and the only thing that seemed certain was Julia's loyalty, who now, more than ever, stood by his side. With the truth revealed, Samuel knew he had to confront Roberto. He couldn't continue living with this secret weighing on his shoulders, especially now that he knew the whole truth. However, he also knew this wouldn't be easy. Roberto and Isabel were powerful and would do anything to keep their public image intact. They wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened the family's status. Samuel and Julia began to devise a plan. They knew the only way to deal with the situation was to expose the secret in a way that Roberto and Isabel couldn't ignore or cover up. But before they could take the next step, something unexpected happened. A tragedy that would change everything. Determined to confront the truth, Samuel went to his mother, Maria, and demanded explanations. With tears in her eyes, she confirmed the story. She explained that Roberto had been involved with her when she was young, before he married Isabel, and that when she found out she was pregnant, Roberto pressured her to hide the fact. When Isabel discovered the affair, she decided to keep everything a secret, but in return, Maria had to work for them for life. A way to keep her under control and ensure the scandal never came to light. Samuel felt deep anger upon hearing this, but he knew he needed to act calmly. He told Julia what he had discovered, and together they devised a plan. They knew that revealing the truth wouldn't be easy because Roberto and Isabel were powerful and would do anything to keep the secret buried. But Samuel was determined to seek justice, not just for himself but for his mother, who had silently suffered for all these years. Meanwhile, Roberto and Isabel began to sense that something was wrong. They noticed the change in Julia's behavior and began to suspect she had discovered something. In an attempt to control the situation, Isabel planned to send Julia to a boarding school, far from the city and away from Samuel. But Julia, determined to stand by her friend, now revealed as her brother, resisted. The tension between the families increased. Samuel and Julia knew they were running against time, and they needed to find a way to expose the truth before it was too late. They decided that the only way to do this was to make what they had discovered public. With the help of a local journalist who sympathized with Samuel's cause, they prepared a bombshell report that would expose the whole truth about Roberto Moreira, his affair, and Samuel's secret. But before they could take the next step, an unexpected tragedy occurred. The situation reached its most delicate point. Samuel and Julia, armed with the truth, were ready to expose the Moreira family's secret and end the decades-long charade. However, tragedy struck before they had the chance to move forward. One stormy night, Maria, Samuel's mother, was hit by a car while returning from work. The accident occurred on a secluded road that connected the Moreira mansion to the town center, and although the authorities initially treated the case as an accident, doubt soon arose. The strange nature of the incident, a car with no identification, witnesses who saw nothing, made Samuel start suspecting something much more sinister. Devastated by his mother's loss, Samuel was silent for days. Grief consumed him, but at the same time, it fueled a burning desire to find out the truth about what had happened. Julia, for her part, stayed by his side throughout, offering all the support she could. Despite the atmosphere of uncertainty and sorrow, they both knew they had to act fast. Samuel, determined not to let his mother's death be in vain, began investigating what really happened on that fateful night. Then an unexpected revelation came to light. During a conversation with the journalist helping to expose the case, Samuel learned that the car that had hit his mother belonged to a shell company connected to one of Roberto Moreira's business partners. The connection was undeniable. Everything pointed to a plan designed to silence Maria before the truth could come out. The secret she had carried for so many years was too dangerous, and someone was willing to kill to protect the lie. Roberto and Isabel, meanwhile, were increasingly under pressure. They knew Samuel and Julia were getting closer to discovering the whole truth, and Maria's death had shaken them, but not enough to stop their plans. Isabel, with her characteristic coldness, began pressuring Roberto to take more drastic measures, fearing that the situation was spiraling out of control. She knew that the only way to keep their reputation intact was to eliminate any threat, and that included Samuel and the journalist. With the journalist's help, Samuel managed to gather enough evidence to implicate Roberto and his business partner in his mother's hit-and-run. They had records of suspicious phone calls, financial documents linking Roberto's shady dealings to the incident, and witnesses pointing directly to the Moreira family's involvement. The plan was clear. Samuel and the journalist would make a public report, exposing everything to the national media. However, Isabel, always alert, anticipated Samuel's move. In a desperate effort to protect her family, she set a trap for the boy and his ally. Using her connections in the town, Isabel manipulated a local police officer to plant false evidence against Samuel, accusing him of theft on one of Roberto's properties. The aim was to discredit him, tarnish his image as a hero, and turn him into a criminal in the eyes of society. If she succeeded, no one would believe the allegations Samuel planned to make. Samuel was arrested on false charges, and the journalist was threatened in every possible way to abandon the case. The town, which had once celebrated Samuel as a hero, was now divided. Many began doubting his integrity, questioning whether his entire story had been a ploy to gain an advantage over the Moreiras. Isabel's manipulation seemed to be working, but Samuel wasn't alone. Julia, more determined than ever to fight for the truth, used her privileged position to try to find a way to free her brother. She began searching for loopholes in the plot her mother had woven, and in one of those searches, she found something surprising. Financial documents hidden in Roberto's office detailing the payment made to the business partner involved in Maria's hit-and-run. These were irrefutable proof linking Roberto and Isabel directly to the crime. While Samuel remained in prison, Julia, with the journalist's help, managed to send the evidence to a national TV network. The scandal exploded with unimaginable proportions. Roberto and Isabel, once untouchable in the town, were now under immense pressure. The story began to gain national attention, and the investigation into Maria's death was reopened. With new evidence in hand, the authorities began tightening the net around the Moreiras. Roberto, in a desperate move, tried to negotiate his way out of the situation, offering large sums of money to those who could silence the case. However, the involvement of the media and public pressure made that impossible. Isabel, seeing the empire she had built crumble, began to lose control. She started showing signs of emotional instability, fearing that Samuel's secret would be revealed. But the worst was yet to come. Amid the investigation, an even deeper secret came to light. While reviewing Roberto's old financial records, investigators discovered that he was involved not only in illegal business, but also in a money laundering scheme that had sustained his wealth. Isabel, who had always believed she was the grand manipulator, found out that her husband had kept secrets even from her. She had no idea of the depth of Roberto's crimes, and when the truth emerged, she collapsed. The facade of control and power that Isabel had maintained disintegrated. In her moment of emotional collapse, Isabel confessed the entire truth about Samuel. During an interrogation, she revealed that Samuel was indeed Roberto's son, the result of an affair they had covered up for years. The shock of this revelation shook the town and the country even further. Samuel, the boy who had been treated as a nobody for so long, was in fact part of the powerful family that had always despised him. Just when it seemed that all the truths had been laid bare, one final secret surfaced, changing everything. During the investigations into the money laundering scheme, authorities discovered that the true mastermind behind Maria's death wasn't Roberto, it was Isabel. In one last desperate act, fearing that Samuel's secret would be exposed, Isabel had organized the hit-and-run, without Roberto's knowledge. The business partner had acted under her orders, and the blame had been placed entirely on Roberto. The shocking revelation left everyone stunned. Isabel, the woman who had always appeared cold and in control, had gone far beyond what anyone had imagined. She was arrested, and Roberto, morally and financially ruined, was also convicted of his financial crimes. The Moreira Empire collapsed, and the family, once the most powerful in town, was reduced to ashes. Samuel, despite everything, remained strong. In time, he was exonerated from the false accusations and became a symbol of resilience and courage. His story, marked by tragedy and painful revelations, went on to inspire the entire town. He and Julia, now recognized as siblings, vowed to rebuild their lives far from the dark past of the Moreira family.